You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You know how sometimes you go looking for something and you don't find it, but you find something surprisingly better. I went looking for someone who knew Dr. Jane Goodall because we recently lost her, and that was tragic. She was in 90, and she had had a full life and had been an amazing primatologist and world famous, etc. But I thought it would be nice to have, a sort of memory of her on the program. And I found Dr. Shirley Strum, but I didn't know that was real gold. Because, well, I think you'll hear if you listen carefully. She, for 50 years, was in the jungles in Africa, working with baboons, which are next to chimps the most closest to human beings. What she has found is extraordinary, and she's extraordinary and a real feminist. So it was kind of amazing. Shirley Strum, Dr. Strum, is a professor of anthropology and a professor of the Graduate Division School of Social Sciences at the University of California, San Diego, and director of the Uaso Ngiro Baboon Project in Kenya. She is the author of Almost Human, A Journey into the World of Baboons, which came out in the 80s, and just recently, the author of Echoes of Our Origins, Baboons, Humans, and Nature, which came out in 2025. And she is a delight, and so are baboons. You would not have thought that. So we will return with Dr. Shirley Strum in just a moment after this brief message. So stick with us. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Dr. Shirley Strum. Shirley, if I may, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
Well, my honor and my pleasure. We have two fronts to cover today. One is you yourself as a primatologist and a great researcher, particularly into baboons and all that they can teach us. But also, before we get there, you were a good friend of Jane Goodall's, who we've lately lost, but who lived in her 90s and who was just a magnificent major presence for science, for humanity, for all of us. So maybe you could talk for a little bit about her and your friendship with her, and then we'll go on to your new book and so forth.
Okay. I've known Jane Goodall for a long time, and of course I've known about her for my whole career. She did a tremendous amount of good for wild chimps, captive primates, and for humans. She was a captivating and gracious lecturer. She usually gave her chimpanzee pant hoot at the beginning of every lecture, which of course impressed people. I can only do copulation grunts. I'm not very good. Baboon copulation grunts, yeah.
Wow.
But I think I'd like to start with her early chimpanzee work because it was because of her work that chimps became a model, displacing baboons as models for early human evolution. And as her mentor, Louis Leakey, said, because of what chimps do, we have to redefine what human means.
Precisely.
Yeah, and she worked tirelessly to promote her vision for the good of all, both humans and animals, through lectures. And of course, she died while she was on one of these lecture tours.
I know. She didn't die in
Yeah,
Bombay. Unfortunately, she didn't die in Africa, where she loved things so much. She died among the folks, among the humans. But she was a great soul. Just an absolutely. I read somewhere that for her 90th birthday, since she loved dogs, I guess she loved
yeah,
animals, all animals, but she loved dogs. She assembled every dog that she knew and all her friends' dogs on a beach and had them have a huge, wonderful run in the surf, which is a wonderful way to celebrate your 90th birthday. God.
yeah, it really is. It
Mm,
really is.
mm.
Um, I think the other thing that's important is because she was a celebrity, people took her advice, which
Ah,
is hard to do
yeah,
today.
yeah.
And it's been hard for her to do over most of her, not her early life, but her later career. Um, Her influence in conservation grew over the years as she became advocate. She said that she went to a meeting at the University of Chicago about chimpanzees, and she arrived as a scientist and she left as an activist.
Ah,
So she became a campaigner for wild primates, for humans, for climate change, for ecocide, which
yeah,
she took that term from somebody else, but she defined it as the destruction of nature.
yeah.
But I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, depending on both the history and the context, when it happened, and also whether she was um, in the international spotlight or was she in the local spotlight. And because I've been working in Kenya for more than 50 years,
Mm,
it's funny, if you ask Kenyans who is Jane Goodall, they won't know. Well, maybe now they'll know because it's all over social media,
ah,
but before they wouldn't know.
uh-huh,
If you ask some Tanzanians, it depends where you ask, they might know.
huh.
Um, and so it really does depend on history and context. Louis Leakey wanted someone whose mind wasn't distorted by science, and that's why he picked her to begin with.
Hmm.
What was a surprise both to her and National Geographic was that she was so popular. She sort of filled a niche
Yeah,
that they exploited afterwards and never actually expected, nor did she expect it. So she published in National Geographic magazine in 1963, in 1965, and afterwards as well. And she started her series of films in 1965.
uh,
Um,
one of
the
the
fact
things
that
certainly that we the ordinary folk learned about was that women, of course, had not been visible or listened to or paid attention or even there, perhaps, in primatology and in most science. And she was one of the first to crack that. And now I think I read somewhere that most primatologists are women, or a large amount of them are.
So I think it has more to do with the publicity than it does with the reality, because
Ah,
um, she was part of a move, a different kind of move because of Louis Leakey. He didn't want science or a scientist. And so there were a lot of field people before her, including women. But the difference is that she got the publicity, whereas the others. So, for example, Phyllis J. Dollinow studied gray langurs in India from 1958 to 1960. Jane didn't even start until late 1961. There was Barbara Harrison doing orangs, Allison Jolly doing lemurs, Susan Ripley doing langurs in Ceylon. And then, so there was that. Yeah. And the thing is, although she gets credit for that, and I think that that's reasonable, it's also a bit of a halo effect because anthropology was already a woman's field. I want to remind you of Margaret Mead.
Mead, yes, Mead, of course.
Yes, Ruth Benedict.
Yeah.
These are in the 20s and 30s. Mary Douglas, who was British, and Elizabeth Colson.
Yeah.
So they were way before, and anthropology was considered a feminist science. And so, yeah.
And it's also interesting that around that same time, more like the late 60s and the early 70s, a little later, but around that time, the women's movement was beginning this time around.
Exactly. I looked at the statistics for changing in the field.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that it has a lot more to do with the women's movement than it does with Jane Goodall. And I'll tell you why. It took from 1960, when she started, to 2000, which is 40 years, for the proportion of women in the field to change. And now in 2025, there are more women in the field than there are men in anthropology. I don't like the term primatology, but I say primate science, and in field biology. But I really think that the second wave feminism also had a really big role. And Jane romanticized and popularized field work.
Sure.
And in the last 10 interns that have come to work with me, they all came because of Jane Goodall. I mean, this is in the last 15 years.
Right.
And then what they discovered was that field work was actually hard work, not romantic. And none of them ended up doing primate studies as their area of interest or a job. So I think that the public, and I'm not trying to detract from that, but the public is fed some ideas about Jane, most of which are really good. But in fact, for example, I was looking at how ideas about primates change, and we had a meeting based on that. And during that time, in the 1950s, Japanese scientists were already taking topics like family, social relations, matriline's, which was way, way ahead of their time. And I can remember in the 60s being told, ignore the Japanese. But again, all of the scientists were men.
Yeah.
And so that convinced me that it's cultural. And then we have the US where, we live in a patriarchy. And until recently, second wave feminism actually did a great deal of good for women.
It's good to hear that. God knows we haven't been for nothing then, because these days it's very hard, and
I know, I know.
so, but
And
but we're still trucking, and and the fact that women have gone in to the field of primatology, or not, let's say not primatology, but primate science.
uh,
Uh,
you can call it primatology. I just don't like the term.
no, well, I can adapt. um, and but the fact that women, whatever got more women in, whether it was the women's movement, whether it was some glamorizing of Goodall, was a good
Hmm.
thing, was a great thing, because any way that women can enter science, because it's been such a closed field for so long,
It
um,
has.
that is awfully good for humans in general and for science. God knows, I go around being a science geek and beating my little drum and saying, but the science, in the middle of a religious revival in this country and a right-wing
Yeah,
revival. So I'm I'm not terribly popular on those fronts, but um, which brings me to the work that you're doing and that you've done for some time. I find fascinating, and I do think that it's possibly true that, media has room in a sense for one or maybe two, maybe, but usually
yeah,
one. And I would know more about your work with baboons if in a sense it hadn't been for Goodall, but media exhausted itself on Goodall with everything that she deserved about it. But she was young and blonde and pretty, and and had great legs, as somebody commented. And so that's what gets mostly covered, or first covered, and then but in the wake of that, more women come in, and that is a very good thing. So
yeah.
that's what I want to talk about now. I want to talk about your.
Okay, but I'd just like to sum up on Goodall that we, the audience, really want happy solutions.
Yeah.
And that's what she supplied in her lectures, in her institutions, and in her books.
Uh-huh.
Hope. She gave people hope, and she
Right.
did a tremendous amount of good. So I don't think anyone around is going to replace her. Um, it's just the wrong time, the wrong media, the wrong everything. So she'll really be missed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the women coming into every aspect of these fields are stunning. I mean, recently we had some climatologists on, and they're glacier experts, and
Mm,
they were talking about, the way that glaciers, of course, remember it's embedded. The history is embedded
yeah,
in, um, but they are speaking of hope because 40% of the world's ice is still with us. I, of course, as a layperson, am filled with horror that it's only 40%. But,
exactly. Hmm.
it is hope. And just as it was, it's tremendous hope. Well, when I was reading about your stuff, as I say, I haven't finished the book, but I want to. But that you felt fairly early on too. You realized that far from being, I don't know, John Wayne's of the primate world,
Yeah,
that baboons understood in effect and had embedded in somewhat what their DNA, their I don't know, but they're embedded in them, the golden rule, or a
yeah,
version thereof. And I mean, that in itself is just amazing. It is amazing. And there's a stable, they don't have a stable hierarchy, because that was what, of course, I mean, men just reflected themselves, didn't they?
yes,
They
yes.
projected themselves onto, name it, glaciers, the animal world, primates. I mean, they just,
Everything.
yeah,
Yeah,
the ego is
everything.
pretty strong, everything. And so when you get these odd alien creatures called women, um, in in the field, you get an entirely different perspective. It reminds me of the heart attack study. I don't know if you remember, but it was assumed, of course, that
Oh,
men,
yeah.
only had heart. And I mean, millions of women died. And then they discovered, oh, yeah, women are not small men after all. What do you know? But still, to this day, the National Institutes for Health don't have a full through composed rule on this. I mean, it's spotty. So, talk about your work with the social strategies that baboons have built relationships on, and
Okay.
I mean, it just gives me a whole. I want to go to the zoo and meet baboons all over again, and apologize to them because this is I wronged them terribly, but I didn't know. Go ahead.
So I think I have to start at the beginning because I was interested in trying to find the origins, which I'm going to talk about in a moment because humans' worst behavior is our own. It's not what other species do. But anyway, I was interested in the origins of human aggression, and
Mm.
baboons had this. It was called a baboon model, and not only was it at that time there were more studies of baboons, 3, than of any of other species of primate.
Mhm.
But the 3 scientists got together. They were all men, and they came up with what they thought was the similarity between baboons. And I only learned later that, well, I won't go into that. We don't have enough time. So I went out to try and understand whether uh, these baboons were the way they had been described. And immediately I discovered they weren't. Um, and that's because only the males had been identified, and even the male dominance hierarchy was the result of feeding the male baboons, not anything else, because it was too dynamic.
Mhm.
So the second wave feminism really liked my idea that females were the core of the group, that they performed a lot of the functions that were ascribed to male baboons.
Mhm.
And I've been around for 50 years of my career, and during that time, I've changed, baboons have changed, science has changed, and nature has changed.
Yeah.
And so I think what I found was, and now I'm skipping to the end of my career, the most sophisticated and smart non-human society that's yet been described. Now, I think you have to study a long time because if an animal doesn't speak, um, you won't figure it out unless you're there for a very long time.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and so I'm more than willing and open to accepting that other animals are just as sophisticated and as smart. It's just they haven't been studied for so long.
Yeah, well, we know about
Um,
whales. God knows.
Yeah, well, no, even they don't have the sophistication that baboons have and
Wow.
that dolphins have. So, like one of the things that was the result of watching for so long was not only finding the female dominance hierarchy, but in those days, in the early part of my career, the dominance hierarchy, the status of the female was linked to her reproductive success.
Yeah.
And I just didn't find that. Um, and so I kept watching, and it was only maybe 15 years ago that I finally saw enough that made me think that it's all about predictability. The female hierarchy is about predictability, and baboons hate anything that's unpredictable.
Hmm.
And I was seeing the society fall apart and fight and disintegrate before my eyes. And then it coalesced. And that made me have this other interpretation of the female hierarchy. And it solved a problem that no one was able to solve before, which is why would a low-ranking female stay in the group? Why doesn't she go somewhere else? And the whole predictability thing is it's good for her as well, not just for those who are higher ranking than she is.
She's a stakeholder in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I found it so fascinating that when you write when male aggression does erupt, which is not that common. I mean, the idea of crazy as a baboon is not crazy.
No,
But let's say when it does erupt, the loser can recruit an infant, which the troop naturally defends, to placate the winner. But only, and this is amazing, if he chooses the right infant,
that's correct.
which demonstrates each member's unique social standing, and the complex problems that they can solve in unique ways. I mean, and another example of their advanced decision making is when they surprised you by doing supposedly the wrong thing. They this is the mobbing exercise when
Yeah, yeah,
they went someplace that they had been mobbed by another troop, and usually an effective way to say don't do that again is to not go there. But
right.
this they did, and they surprised you. I mean, they're quite saucy and smart. I mean, they're not.
They're yeah, they're very smart. They're very sophisticated. They have agency.
They do.
They have options. Not all animals choose of the same age sex class choose the same options. Um, and we've made them into these kind of animal machines that are perfectly adapted
Yeah.
to their environment, and they're not like that at all. The second case you're talking about is they went back again and again and again to a place where they were mobbed by another troop. And they eventually, it was there, they were there to get the fruit of an invasive cactus.
Ah.
Um, but when as the cactus spread to their traditional home range, they moved. And, 8 years later, I don't think even humans can plan 8 years in advance. And so it's pretty clear to me that it told me about evolution being much more tolerant of, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the fit enough,
That's
which
right.
is
That's right.
really different. It's
Yeah.
really different. There's
Yeah.
a lot more room for mistakes. And I just like to point out that humans and chimpanzees and bonobos split 6 million years ago. So that means each species had 6 million years in which to develop whatever it was that they developed.
Right. I have to
And
confess that I'm a big bonobo fan. I mean,
yeah,
I just adore them. I mean, I think that anytime you fight with somebody, you immediately drop everything and make love is the most wonderful possible thing that any primate or non-primate has come up with yet. It's just amazing.
right.
Good to go on.
But my point is really that chimps and bonobos are endangered and
Yeah.
baboons aren't. And
Ah.
at one time they said there were more baboons in Africa than people. That was a while ago. Um, and I think the reason is that baboons are so adaptable and so smart. Um, and it's chimps are closer to us
Mm.
biologically, but I don't think they're as adaptable.
Ah.
And that's one of the reasons that I don't like to use baboons as models, because now at the end of my career, I don't agree with people trying to find some kind of reference like a chimp or a bonobo for us. Um, but what's clear to me is that, I mean, I started out being interested in human aggression and how baboons could be used to model the earliest stages of human evolution.
Mm.
But I spent most of the 50 years trying to figure out baboons. And now I'm thinking about humans again. And it's sort of, in vogue right now to speak out against human exceptionalism. And from my perspective of having watched baboons for all these years, humans are exceptional.
Mm.
They have been able to take symbols, language, culture, cooperation, and create something that's so different from any other species. Now, I agree that you might be able to find the origins of tool use in chimpanzees or ravens and so forth. But what we've been able to do, and badly not so good today, is to develop that to an extent to which baboons just can't. They've got a glass ceiling of social complexity that they can't break, and we broke it.
Ah,
So, yeah. So I think that it's, while I expect to see the origins in other species, I really think that we can't blame other species for what we have actually created for ourselves.
yeah. No, we certainly can't. But you have done an amazing piece of the puzzle. I mean, it is extraordinary. And in terms of the language split off this, I recently interviewed a remarkable woman who's just come out with a new book. Beekman is her name. I think Madeline, it's Beekman. And she has done actually showing the door very politely to Noam Chomsky and to Wilson and to all of the um, um, not it's not ethno biologists. Um, she has discovered, and I think definitively, that language came about not because of war, not because of hunting, not because of all those manly pursuits, but because of childcare and the necessity for language in childcare, because the infant brain of the human takes so long to develop.
Develop, yeah.
And it's a fascinating book, and it's getting very good reviews. But beside that, I mean, the minute I heard it, everything clicked into place. It just because it's more collaborative, because it requires a village, because and it's more peaceful, and it's more so that there's this whole other female model in what you're doing, in what she's doing, in very different ways that feed into the same flow of a very different way of perceiving the world. And right now, all of my fragile hopes are, pinioned to that hope, because because with scientists saying that we have about 5 years to turn conservation around, and after that, it's too late. It's a pretty scary time, and
Yeah, well, I say that I'd rather have a baboon as president than a human
good
because
judgment. Excellent judgment.
because baboons can't lie, they can't cheat, and they can't exploit each other.
Ah,
And
well,
humans,
that's that
and we
that.
do.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. We do. And we have in power right now, not only in the United States, but primarily in the United States and around the world, men, and I do mean men, who
Mm.
are fixated on precisely that. And it ain't good for the species or other living things. Well,
Oh, no.
you have been a delight, and I'm very grateful to you, Shirley. I mean, for your work and your this extraordinary uncovering of a whole new. I can't wait to get to a zoo and talk with a baboon, communicate with a baboon. But it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. So thank you, and thank you so much for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much.
And the book is called
Echoes of Our Origins,
Echoes
Baboons,
of Origins, Baboons, and
Humans,
Humans
and
and
Nature.
Nature. And it came out
Yeah.
this year. Aha.
It
And
came out September
20,
9th,
2025.
2025. Yeah.
And also another book as well, for an older book, Almost Human, A
Yeah.
Journey into the World of Baboons. So there's those two books, and she is a professor of anthropology. And I just adore the work that you've done, and that baboons have the golden rule is just, and people don't, Okay,
Well, we do in religious texts, but we don't
yeah.
behave that way.
No, we don't follow those. So thank you again, and bless you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much.
We have to take another short break here, but I'll return directly with some warning words and some celebratory words too. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Knowledge is power, and ignorance is powerlessness. And those are warning words. Here are some warning words that crossed my desk this morning, and I think are important. They're from the Journalist's Resource, which comes out of Harvard. Remember Harvard? Haha. The Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. And they're very important because you don't always get these little goodies in the general news. So this is an interesting study. I won't read the whole thing, obviously, but it helps us understand the impact of this ongoing information threat that is coming from the administration. How to navigate the manipulation and removal of federal data. Federal data falls, and the vanishing data, into generally three categories. The targeted removal of data that's not aligned with the Trump administration's priorities. The removals including individual data elements like gender, identity, and race, but not complete data sets. And collateral damage from actions like reductions in the federal workforce, cutting contracts, and terminating scientific advisory committees. While not targeting directly specific data sets, these cuts make it harder for remaining staff to collect and publish data. While these collateral damages to the federal data apparatus get less attention, it will take years or decades to recover from them. And the third being the removal of data that reflects poorly on the performance of the Trump administration's policies. For instance, in June, the Social Security Administration removed performance data, including information on how long people stay on hold when they call the National Call Center, soon after the removal of more than 5,000 staff from the agency. So, how do journalists then cover and navigate this situation? Well, one key tip is to help audiences understand the impact of data removal, which I'm trying to do here. By finding local angles, you can find story ideas on the America's Essential Data website. But if journalists notice the removal or manipulation of data on food insecurity, for example, they can gather anecdotes from people in their communities who are experiencing food insecurity. Qualitative data can be really powerful in the absence of quantitative data. And pairing the absence of the quantitative with the qualitative can make a strong story. That was quote from Allison Plyer, the chief demographer at the Data Center, a nonprofit in New Orleans. And then a word about the No Kings March, which was, of course, in the millions, getting bigger each time. And I was thinking how interesting it was, because this is how it happened with Vietnam. And I'm old enough to remember that. The first marches were dismissed as crazies and communists and, the usual. And then it got taken more seriously, and it got taken more seriously, and it got taken quite seriously. And the numbers had something to do with it. And the numbers, of course, were real. They were accurate. They were people getting it, finally, and not thinking that it was a fun caper or I don't know what they thought Vietnam would have been. But they were taking it very seriously. And finally, so did the country. Now, I'm not saying that this will be as easily dismissed, but it's a very good sign. And I congratulate every single person who was there, and every single person who stood up, and every single person who maybe couldn't be there but was there in spirit, or sent money, or sent greetings, or sent something, because our lives depend on it more now than ever. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burden. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.